Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Training, Learning, and Development community. Happy Friday to everybody. We made it through another week. Got some folks in the live audience already. Josh is here, Toddy, Kim, Double A, Emma, Supika. Thanks for joining us this morning. I'm sure more people will roll in. Great guest today, another member showcase. We've got Matt Tidwell here with us from ThinkThru. And some of you who are familiar with this format, what we're going to do is we got about 30 minutes to chat with Matt. We're going to have 11 questions already in the Ask a Question area. If any of you folks have any questions you want to add, feel free to drop them in there, to drop them in chat. And I'll be happy to quiz Matt on this stuff. Basically, what we're wanting to do is just to learn more about Matt. And from what it looks like on his LinkedIn profile, he has a fascinating story. And so I'm really excited to kind of get into this and get going and ask these questions. So let's just get started, if that's okay with you, Matt.
Yeah, let's do it.
I want to know basically how you just got started into instructional design. Like, how did you get introduced to it? And what was that journey like?
Yeah. So I actually went to school for education, was a music teacher in high school. And so kind of was really focused on public education. But when I got out of college, it was very, very difficult to find a public school job teaching music in the area that I wanted to raise my family. And so ended up actually shifting careers a little bit and started working for a Big Four consulting firm and got in actually to cybersecurity. And through that cybersecurity journey, I started training a lot of our internal team and processes and things around how we were doing certain things, triaging certain data and doing things on certain client engagements. And then that slowly progressed into working with the vendors of our consulting team and actually training, our clients on how to use vendor software and vendor tools. And that ended up, several of those vendors actually asked if I would come in and develop training for them. And so I actually left my consulting job and was really thinking about just working for one of the companies. And kind of right at the last minute, I said, would you all mind just like outsourcing this to me? I'd be really curious if I could just do this freelance. And about 6 weeks later, another vendor that I had previously worked with reached back out. And so in a relatively short amount of time, we had 3 or 4 clients of ThinkThru, which was just a solo person in their home office at the time. And then the team built from there. But
wow. Okay. So Matt, you went from being a music teacher to being a cybersecurity consultant. That's pretty extreme. Like that. I mean, what did you teach? Was it just like a high school music teacher? So you're teaching all kinds of stuff. You're teaching like theory and, getting kids to play instruments that they're probably not so good at. And then you got into cybersecurity consulting. That's a big switch.
My parents thought so too, they did. It was really, I would say, pure luck. It was not anything that was, intricately planned. I was just looking for a great opportunity. And truly, if we lift the hood, my very first year at that company, I worked in an evidence room. And all I did all day from right around 8 a.m. to about 6 p.m. was to unpack hard drives and disassemble computers and then hook up, hard drives and get all the data off of them and then get it into our processing platforms to start reviewing data. And so I did that for about a year. And I was very, very fortunate that I started like making processes and training around that. I don't know. It's just always like a workflow thing for me. Yeah. And so started building training around that. And one of the directors at another office saw that training and yanked me out of that closet and said, "Hey, hold on, come here." And so thankfully for him, he got me out of that evidence room and then into some meeting rooms. And then that's when the consulting work started. So
have you always had a little bit of a technical side to you?
I think so. In music school, I studied drums and piano. And so just kind of like patterns and how things are arranged and organized and orchestrated. I love theory. So just kind of those nuts and bolts of how things are made I'm always super fascinated by. And then, like learning to code, stuff like that, just very much self-taught in that way. But I'm just always interested. So I think maybe that's why it works. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, pulling apart and, grabbing data off of hard drives and stuff doesn't sound like something a high school music teacher would ordinarily just like jump into, but that sounds pretty extreme. Very cool. That's like really, really interesting. So now that you're in instructional design, you've got your own agency. What's your favorite part of being in this space, being in L&D?
Oh my gosh. For us, I think as an agency, one of my favorite things that we do is we're heavily focused on experimentation. And I didn't realize the value of that when we started, but I think we bring a really unique perspective to larger enterprise organizations because naturally, as you scale an entity, you reduce experimentation. The job of an enterprise is to execute efficiently, lower overhead. The job of a startup is to rapidly test until you figure out what's working, and then you start to systemize. We're still in that middle stage where we very much are experimenting every week, new platforms, new tools, new frameworks, new process. And what I've realized now is that the reasons why we're getting the jobs we get is because organizations are essentially like outsourcing that innovation risk to us. They're saying like, we don't have to hurt our bottom line. We want you to experiment and figure this out for us. And so there's a lot of collaboration. It's not as black and white defined all the time. But I think that's really what keeps me personally interested. And I think the team, maybe it drives them crazy a little bit because we're always kind of on to the next thing a little bit. But but that's really neat because it allows us to work in things like driver safety, human trafficking prevention, public schools, music, automotive parts manufacturing, cybersecurity and consulting, even traditional SaaS platforms like CRM companies and things like that. Like we're kind of interjecting all these different places because we're bringing that same little recipe of experimentation and we're just saying, how does this apply to your industry? Like, let's figure this out together. So,
wow, that is really, really cool. So, because a lot of people just really don't have the stomach for innovation. You kind of have to have a certain mindset, a certain willingness to take risks to innovate, and it's all about just creating that change. So, I mean, can you be a little more specific? Any kind of project that you're working on right now that you can talk about?
Yeah, so we're actually doing a project with the state of Tennessee right now that is, I would say, probably one of the more ambitious ones that we've taken on. We're working with all of the jails and prisons across the state to develop a human trafficking identification program and really training everyone through the entire life cycle of someone who has kind of entered into one of the state systems and really trying to figure out a way that we can upskill people and make them maybe more cognizant or more aware of maybe some of the underlying behaviors and tendencies and not take things at face value. And so really trying to make that process, that cycle, that journey a better place. And it's kind of like anti-corporate in a lot of ways because a lot of our projects, I would say, are very like corporate product-based SaaS companies, high-tech space sort of stuff. But this project is for a nonprofit joint partnership with the state, and it actually took on kind of a life of its own. It's a part documentary, part training and assessment, and then kind of toolkit and resources for prisons. So it's a really neat kind of hybrid mix of things. So really,
wow. What's the delivery like on that? Like you're saying, part documentary.
Yeah, so we actually had the opportunity to interview and follow several survivors of human trafficking as they like progress through the various, institutional systems. And then at the same time, we're interjecting with like clinical psychologists and medical professionals in prisons. Then we're interviewing like TBI officers and, human trafficking sting operation people. And we're bringing all these experts in. And so it's, I would say we're doing our best to not make it like traditional e-learning. We're really trying to make it, as sort of like feature film based, but then also there's like a resource toolkit, there's facilitator guides for the prisons. And then there's like a workshop that goes with that series. So.
That sounds incredible. Is there any, I mean, is there what served as inspiration for that, or is it something that you just kind of came up with and like, let's just do all these things, or um, did
Uh,
anything particularly like just sort of point you in that direction, or?
I was here in Nashville. There's an amazing creative conference, much like your conferences. And no, I was like shameless
Come
plug,
on,
right?
man.
No, but no, there's an amazing conference, and I went, and they had circus actors like in the lobby. It's a conference called Story, and they had like all these. It was just really crazy. It's like being in Alice in Wonderland or something. And I saw a fundraising film for a team called the International Justice Mission. And I was like, I had never been more motivated at that moment. I was like, wait a minute, there's a recipe there. I went from being completely unaware to now like completely sold out to this cause. And I was like, whatever that recipe is, it's part story, it's part human, it's part like a lot of things. But if I could find a way to change people's motivation or behavior that way, like that's the ticket. Like if you can figure out how to get people to care that much all of a sudden in 1.5 minutes, like that's the thing. And so we had an opportunity. We had previously developed training with the nonprofit agency, and they said, can we do something different? And we were like, yes, we've got a pitch. Like, hold on, let's go get our PowerPoint deck together. And so we did that, and they said yes. So
That's great. So it sounds like, I mean, just knowing your background, the way that you got into instructional design, being somebody that's an innovator, that you probably take a lot of influences that are outside of traditional instructional design channels to bring into the stuff that you build. Is that something that you is that true? You think that's correct?
I think so. And I'll be honest, I hope it doesn't come across bad, but I didn't know what instructional design was for a while. And I don't know if others feel that way in the group. I feel like I was doing it, and then someone told me that's what I was doing, and I was like, oh, okay, got it. And then I started down the path of like, I need to refine these skills, and then I realized like it's not just my skills. I need to find other people who have these skills innately as well. And so it became a lot more about who can we bring on, who can we get involved. But I hope I'm not alone in that. But I really, it took
No,
me.
I don't think you're alone. I
I
mean,
designer.
even in my background, I remember when I started out the e-learning guild, I think it took like 4 or 5 years before I'm like, wait, why do people keep talking about this thing called instructional design? Like I'm in e-learning, and then it's like, oh, okay, I get it.
Good. Okay. Whew, I'm not alone because
at least, or maybe it's just you and I. You never know. You never know. All right, I'm going to take it back to something that's a little that I think is kind of interesting. The fact that you were a traffic school instructor. So what is that about? And the reason why that's interesting to me is because I used to work at a hotel, and that hotel used to host traffic school. And the people that would come in to teach traffic school were always stand-up comedians or performers of some type. And so, well, musician, but I don't know how that relates. But where does that fit into to your profile?
Yeah. So I grew up in a heavy law enforcement family. I'm like the only male in my family that didn't go into the military or didn't become a police officer. So kind of the odd one out, but I just kind of grew up in that world. When my father retired from Nashville police, he started teaching traffic school as sort of like an extra stream of income. And he ended up purchasing a business that was a traffic school business. He ended up purchasing a business, and shortly, like a year after or so, the state of Tennessee required that anyone who's authoring content like that have a degree in education. They have to have somebody on staff in order to maintain like certification and standards and things. And so they actually passed that bill. And he called me and he said, I think I'm about to have to, do something else. Like I'm going to have to lose the business. And I just said, I have a degree in education. I'm not a traffic safety person, but you've got 30 years experience in law enforcement. Like if we need to write something, I'm happy to help like guide the subject matter experts into this. And so we ended up developing a couple of programs. and it was an extra job for me for a while. I taught, I think, like 600 something traffic schools, which was a lot, but it really helped me also understand like how to keep people engaged, into paying attention to something like traffic school.
Well, because I don't know if anybody else knows, but I remember like once people got into that room in traffic school, you were kind of locked in there. You had to stay in there. Otherwise you don't get signed off as like, completing traffic school. And working the front desk, like during lunches, I just remember people coming up and leaning on my counter, just like complaining about, how many hours do I have left of this? And
totally. It's crazy though, because the business that was taken over. Hey, Cheryl, that's awesome. I just saw your note here in the chat. Thank you so much. But I remember distinctly going in and auditing the previous business, and the person pushed out a TV, stuck in a VHS tape, hit play, and left a courtroom with like 40 something people in there for 2.5 hours to just watch this film, and didn't monitor anything. And I was like, I'm not a rocket scientist, but surely there's a better way to like do that, And so that happened. And then during 2020, my family essentially, they didn't sell the business, but I took on a little bit of that process. And so we took everything virtual, took everything online. And so now that whole school is virtual. So.
Wow. Amazing. Very, very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move over to the origin story of ThinkThru. I'd like to hear about, let's talk about your agency. How did this all start? I mean, you talked about it. You already introduced us a little bit to it, that you wanted to outsource some of this stuff, but give us a little bit more. Like, what was your motivation to do it? And was it just something late one night you're like, I'm just doing it? Or how did that work?
It was, again, like largely by accident, and then it was like, wait a minute, this is working. Like maybe we should double down on this and try it. So it was really, honestly, it was that sort of mentality. But I think what our unique perspective on education is for companies is, rather than being internally focused, there's a lot of fantastic people doing that work. And I didn't know that we could really help a lot in that area. But what I thought we had a different perspective on was how enterprise organizations and how technology companies could engage and make their customers' lives better. Like, how could we improve customer experience? How could we improve customer success? How could we increase revenue? How could we improve usability? How could we start to take education and leverage it in that way, like outside an organization, to make people just completely fall in love with your product and never leave? And so that was the theory that we've been testing, is can education really serve as that sort of front door experience for brands, And we actually just had our client hit $89 million in training sales as of this year in online training. And so it's just really, really remarkable to see kind of the power of education and how that builds affinity with product and brand. And then I think it actually gets brands to be even more helpful and make better products, because they're really building in a continuous feedback loop with their customers that might otherwise kind of get shelved to like customer support tickets or something else. But education's a kind of a new vehicle in their mind, or at least perspective, for that customer engagement. So.
Wow, that's really, really impressive, Matt. Congratulations. So what's your day-to-day like? Like, describe a typical day for you. CEO, founder of ThinkThru. What happens when you get up in the morning?
Mornings are starting earlier than they used to. So it's, first thing in the morning, I usually try to get any of the most important work done before my team's online. And so that's a lot of like proposal writing, pitching, things like that. Or it's thinking about job placements, team members, all of that. So I do that really early in the morning. Then right around kind of like everyone's normal start time, 8:39, it's some staff meetings, some development meetings. We just launched a platform for it's a subscription-based service for unlimited video editing for training. And so we just launched that platform. And so I'll be working with developers on features and stuff. And then in the afternoons, it's almost exclusively client calls, just either serving as account management sort of functions or figuring out next projects or pitching. So morning's kind of like deep work. Afternoon is almost Zoom phone call land. And then right in that kind of middle of the day is mostly teamwork. So.
Wow. Where do you fit that innovation stuff in?
Yeah. And wee hours of the night usually now, right? So
right. Yeah. That's when I feel the most innovative at 1 a.m. It's like, oh yeah, I've got this crazy idea because I'm half asleep right now and I think I'm just gonna do it.
Yeah. And then you get the notebook and the PowerPoint out, it's like, hold on.
Exactly. So what are some things that you know now that you wish you had known when you had started out?
Oh, man. My fiance actually asked me this the other day, and so I'm glad that you've asked it too, because now I actually have an answer I didn't before. The one thing I didn't realize starting a team or starting a business or a project, anything, is that the difficulty level doesn't make it more valuable. And that took a while for me to wrap my head around, that how challenging or complex we make it doesn't mean it's worth any more. And oftentimes, if we can reduce that complexity, it might even be more valuable to clients the easier it is. I think I felt like this need to sort of make the most elaborate things when we first started creating and product simulations and scenarios and interactive stuff. And, it's time consuming to build. It could get expensive. It's very complicated to explain. But the more we streamline and sometimes the less we do, the less we get in the way, the more valuable it is. So,
wow, Matt, can I clip that and share that one out?
Please. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Excellent. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to get that one out there. I love it. That's a good one. Yeah. So who or what keeps you inspired?
Oh man. Well, I would honestly say, well, personally, my family. I could literally not keep this schedule that I keep without having the support there. I've wanted to give up a lot, and anybody that's says they're self-made or whatever is great, good for them. But there have been many weeks and weekends and days where I'm like, you know what, I should really just take up our client's offer and just go work for them, and life would get a lot simpler. Yeah. And I don't fault anybody for doing that. I think it's amazing. But if you get a chance to do it, you should shoot your shot. I think professionally, I didn't anticipate this because, honestly, I'm a newer business owner, but I didn't anticipate the impact that great people, like great team members, would have on my own motivation. I felt like there was some sort of innate ability, requirement to always be the driver of the ship and be like, here's what we're doing and we're all going to go do this. But as we onboard more people, I'm like, holy crap, we are so lucky that you're here. I literally wanted to quit last week, and now that I've met you, you've completely shifted my vision. We're in the exact right spot. We didn't mess up at all. This is exactly where we need to be. And all it takes is the right people. And so it may sound cheesy or cliche, but it's true at this moment. Is the new team members we've just brought on literally make me want to show up to work. They're awesome.
Yeah. No, that is not cheesy or cliche at all. Believe me, it's because I know the feeling. I know the feeling. Like I'm saying, those 1 a.m. sort of oh, what am I doing? What am I doing? kind of moments where, and that stuff keeps you going. That is wonderful. That's an excellent answer. It's actually good for me to hear because I often go through that. And honestly, for me, a lot of times what keeps me going is being able to talk to people like you and to put on events and know that I've got something, that I'm contributing. And so that really does, help me a lot of the time. So, thanks for sharing that.
For sure. Thank you.
So we've got about 5 more minutes. I want to hear about a training project that you're especially proud of, maybe one that you did with ThinkThru, that something that stands out and might, that you're willing to share with us.
Yeah, I think this the human trafficking project that I mentioned is something that is really, really, I would say, outside the norm of what we've been engaged to do. And so incredibly fascinated by that. From a practical or kind of tactical standpoint for like enterprise companies, we've had a relationship that's been really, really strong in the legal consulting space. And, we had a theory that was, if we could teach people about the industry and not about the tool, because they're trying to sell a tool at the end of the day. They got a software platform, they're amazing, but they're trying to sell a product. And the theory that we wanted to test at ThinkThru was, if we just focus on the industry and foundational concepts, could that transfer of knowledge elevate the perspective of potential customers or existing customers? And could we drive potentially more demand or more usage of the product? And so we were trying to correlate, let's not teach functions, features, widgets, drop downs, menus, how to do stuff. Let's teach you why. And let's focus on core industry kind of foundational things that maybe you didn't learn in college, or maybe you have to just learn on the job. Let's focus on those things. And we saw right at the beginning of 2020, like March-ish time, we had 8,000 customers sign up their first month, and they're all paying customers. And so we had 8,000 of those, and then that expanded into like 16,000 enrollments. And then we started to see more and more people taking that. And then the organic reach on LinkedIn was really, really high. And so the marketing director at our client called and was just like, we had no idea that when we were talking about training, like we're thinking about like screen share, Camtasia video, like walk people through our product, but this completely reinvented what we thought training's purpose was. Wow. And that was like, okay, maybe we should keep doing this. I was like, all right, maybe we're onto something, but we just focused on like, how do we help people not sell this widget and not live in some support portal? Like, how can we use education and your brand perspective to help and bridge those gaps? So
that is really cool. I kind of want to just take a break and think about that for a second, but I guess I have to ask you some more questions. I'm going to have to come back to that because that is really, really fascinating. That's great stuff. I think that's innovative. So congratulations with that, Matt. That's really, really cool.
Thanks.
Yeah. A couple more questions for you. Sure. So if you weren't an L&D professional, what do you think you'd be?
An architect.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think so. I love buildings. That's nerdy to say probably, but I love like going into cities and just like looking at structures and buildings and how it's made. I think if I could go back to school, I would go back to school to learn how to do like blueprints and stuff. That'd be amazing. So
that's cool. I mean, it almost like fits well with your sort of your think through concept, just because there's all that structure, right? Yep. And it sounds like you're very like sort of flow and process oriented. So so that makes sense. But that's a far cry from like, I guess, being a musician in some ways, I guess, because music is so much more fluid and potentially spontaneous and crazy.
Kim said, why not go back to school? I would love that. I love to learn, Kim. So if I could ever convince my family to let me get to go back to school, I would totally do it. So
all right. So last question, Matt, and then we'll wrap it up for this Friday. If there's one thing that people should know about you, what is it?
Oh my gosh. You saved that one for last?
Save that one for last.
Oh man, I really, if anybody thinks about maybe the work that I've been able to do and what we're trying to build, is we're really trying to be the most helpful education company in the world, not motivated really by the finances. That's great. I think it comes once you do good work. But I really think education is a great vehicle to make the change that we need. There's challenges in like traditional educational structures that make that change difficult. But I think as L&D folks, as training folks, as we borrow from the disciplines of marketing and sales and product development and engineering, I think the L&D pros are the people that could really start to make that kind of helpfulness happen in the world. If we just get the opportunity to get outside of the, kind of the tactical daily pieces of our job, I think we can really make something special. So I think that's our function. So.
Wow, thanks, Matt. That's great. And and I do think that's key is being able to borrow from all these other disciplines and bring it to what you do. I mean, that really is kind of the key to innovation is just looking for other models that you think can help, just make that education that much more valuable. So, yeah, Matt, thanks so much. What a great conversation. I'm so glad I got to talk to you. I really appreciate your time, and if there's anything that TLDC can do for you, just let me know. Just hit me up. I'm going to go ahead. Is it okay if I post your LinkedIn profile in chat so that people can connect with you?
Oh yeah, please do. Thank you. I think it's Matt Tidwell. That became like the handle for everything these days. It's Matt.
Yeah. There it is. I posted in chat. So you guys connect with Matt. I had a great time in talking with you today. And hopefully we'll talk again at some point soon.
Yeah, absolutely. You're a rock star. Thank you so much for just letting me tag along. I really appreciate this.
Absolutely. No, it was my pleasure. All right, everybody. Don't forget AIDC21.com. That's the accessible and inclusive design conference that we've got going on in July. Sign up. It's free. It's one of the more valuable things that I feel like I'm helping produce in my life. So sign up for that one because we all can understand accessibility and inclusion better. So sign up for that one. And then next week, I think we have more member showcases, more broadcasts. And with that, see you later. Have a great weekend, everybody.